I'd like to share with you, first of all, a short little 1-minute clip that really sums up some of the issues about children and the environment. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional and give thanks to the traditional Aboriginal custodians of this land, past and present. As Tom Hawkins said earlier today, 4 months ago when I was asked to give this presentation, I too became quite nervous. What was I to say? And so I'm grateful to be here today and be inspired by the many talks and by particularly Barbara Fredrickson's work yesterday about love and how that is so central to our well-being. The work I've done has introduced those principles based on love, but also healthy living and healthy lifestyles into communities. Contemporary American culture fails to nurture the intellectual, emotional and spiritual needs and yearnings of our young people. Joseph Chilton Pearce. The child's potential is, Joseph sees the child's potential as a seed that's needing to be nourished and nurtured to grow properly. What we have to do is create environments and not overstimulating environments in order for that child's potential to grow. Today I will talk about how to create those environments and why it is important and why we are doing this. Because what I've seen by taking those elements, we have the capacity to create joy. And that is the fundamental principle, I believe, of why we are here. The relationship to self, family, community and country, I believe we need to get back in balance. We've heard today about talking about our meditation practices and our family. Our community, as Barbara was saying yesterday, is also critically important. And then also our relationship to country, so we have the environment. Also we have that respect and responsibility, both to ourselves, our country and community. The 7 years I spent working with socially and economically disadvantaged communities, I found that these principles of creating well-being were the eco-principles, actually simplifying people's lives. The 3 elements that I'll talk about today are reducing and eliminating plastics and chemicals in the environment, how television and technology affects children's well-being, and the role and importance of nature. It starts with simplicity. Simplicity in the outer life is beautiful. In the inner life, simplicity is invincible. We've forgotten in Western civilization of how to bring, we've replaced in Western civilization complexity with simplicity. And then we've forgotten how to bring that simplicity into our inner life, our invincibility. The programs I've run have helped parents create that simplicity in their lives by stripping away plastics and technology, going back to the joyful principles. The joy I witnessed and saw, and people kept on reporting from day one of the children walking into the environments, was extraordinary. One mother who was disadvantaged, came from a disadvantaged background, had 5 developmentally delayed children. After a couple of months of working in this way, she changed. Her daily visits to the health clinics were no longer of necessity. So what happened? One of the first things we needed to do was introduce healthy food. We saw children coming in with blue bottles of cordial and big green bottles of cordial. And they were wired. Basically, they were being poisoned by these chemicals in these drinks. And the mothers would say, these chemicals, these drinks are available in the supermarkets. What's wrong with them? So a gentle process of introducing water into these communities was one of the first fundamental things. Also then, so why pollutants why pollutants? What's happening in children's toys? There are pollutants in children's toys, tin food, cosmetic and personal care products. Over 80,000 chemicals have been released into the environment since World War II, with 1,500 chemicals being introduced each year. Most of those chemicals have not been tested on human beings, and certainly not on children. Many of these chemicals remain in the human body a long time after people have been exposed to them. What are these chemicals? Phthalates, bisphenol A, BPA, and organophosphates are some of the main chemicals. There are links between these chemicals, ADHD, neurobehavioural disorders, obesity, diabetes, hormone disruption, heart disease, and cancer. When I started writing my book, I was astounded at how many papers sit out there in the academic realm, and that information is not getting back to the general public. So BPA is a plastic hardener. It's in baby bottles, water bottles, tin food. It was known in the 1930s to be a hormone disruptor. Children have 2 times higher rates of BPA than older adults. And as you saw in the opening clip, 93% of Americans have BPA in their blood. Tin soup, would you believe, it's been shown to raise people's BPA by up to 20 times one serving of tin soup. So some good news, BPA has been banned in Canada and been declared by Canada as a toxic substance. Many other countries need to follow suit, including Australia. Phthalates also are related to ADHD, hormone disruption, and diabetes. Organophosphates are in indoor and outdoor children's settings, home and school environments, and in our food. Infants are exposed to over hundreds of chemicals in utero, and reports are saying that these exposures, particularly in the low socioeconomic sectors, are leading to developmental delays in children as young as 3 years old. So we're talking today here about mental health. It starts in utero, and it starts with a whole concept of the human being, a holistic concept. So how can we protect our children from the chemicals? Breastfeeding is one of the great things that we can do and encourage in the community. We can eat unprocessed, chemical-free food, minimise plastic in our food and in our children's environments. We can eliminate pesticides and use ecological cleaning and personal care products. It's quite a journey to go on to start realising how many things are in, and artificial fragrances, the list of 3 was just the beginning. And we can live simply and start questioning. Violent video games was the second part of my talk. What I saw by removing technology from early childhood environments, the change in children was phenomenal. They became quieter and more related and connected to each other. So as Roald Dahl says, TV rots the senses in their heads. It kills the imagination dead. It clogs and clutters up the brain. It makes a child so dull and blind, he can no longer understand a fantasy. A fairyland, his brain becomes the softest cheese, his powers of thinking rust and freeze. There are 2,200 studies that link media use with aggressive behaviour. The literature is out there. But guess what? We live in a media-saturated society that's not going to communicate that information to everyday people. Our information comes from the media, but certainly getting information about how media affects our well-being they're not going to report. By the age of 18, children will have witnessed over 200,000 acts of violence and 18,000 murders. Violence on TV is linked to aggressive behaviour, and the links are stronger than linking calcium with bone density and passive smoke with lung cancer. And given that technology is changing the brain, how do we stop that effect on the children's brain? One of the things we can do is spend more time in nature and connect with nature, as our earlier presenter was saying. And before we leave that, we were talking earlier about TV and internet addiction in the earlier sessions. One report that I came across was a couple in South Korea found that they left their child to die while they went and tended their virtual baby in a gaming parlour. In South Korea, they have 2 million people classified as internet addicts. So, time in nature. Teaching children about the natural world should be treated as one of the most important events of their life. 64% of children in the UK played outside less than once a week. 28% hadn't been on a country walk in 2009. 21% had never been to a farm, and 20% had never climbed a tree. The child in nature is an endangered species, says Richard Louv, author of Last Child Left in the Woods. An excellent book to start with if you're wanting more information about the children in nature. The health of children and the earth are inseparable. He was one of the inspirations for me writing my book. 75% of people say their most memorable experiences are outdoors. Yet figures show that children spend 93% of their time in early learning centres. The question is, are we raising a generation of amnesiacs? Why do we teach indoors? The University of Wollongong study showed that memory retention and learning outdoors was significantly improved, and certainly behavioural outcomes. So the benefits of nature. Back to the other side. The benefits of nature. A University of Illinois study showed that just a 20-minute walk in nature was as good or better than medication for children with ADHD. Yet, interestingly, those same children taking on a walk in a town centre or suburban street showed no improvement. So it's pure nature. And here in Australia, we are blessed with great, beautiful country. One of the privileges I've had working in the communities is working a lot with the Indigenous communities across Australia. And in the Sydney region, I've had the privilege of meeting an extraordinary woman who's in her late 70s called Frances Bodkin, an Indigenous knowledge holder. Here she's written a book on the Sydney seasons and cycles, and together we're developing a project to make this education and this knowledge of the world more available. She told the story of a golden orb spider and how 2 children touched and stroked this spider when she took them on a walk. So tips for healthier, more resilient families. My experience, and I think it's been confirmed today, prioritising healthy relationships, self, family, community and country, living simply, eating healthier food and using natural materials. Don't underrate the importance of natural materials, both in children's clothes and their environment. Spending time in nature, practicing mindfulness in meditation, and working together, potential for happiness and joy for all children. So where to from here? In the last couple of months, I've been working with RMIT University in Melbourne developing a $2 million funding application to take eco-parenting and to study 12 childcare centres to provide an evidence base of this information going across. Also working with the University of South Australia, developing an evaluation plan, working more along the lines of Dr. Barbara Fredrickson about working on love of nurturing and connectedness, because all of these things are interrelated, and we need to have more evidence base of holistic interventions and why they work and why they are so crucially important. As Professor Mark Cohen says, eco-parenting is not an option, it's a necessity. And as Patrick McGrory said today, governments will not progress things unless the community are wanting things to change. For more information, I missed that slide. So in my book, I have lots of practical solutions. First of all, I wrote it as a research-based book, and the feedback I got was, what's the solutions? So the book here today and then up in the foyer has lots of information of very practical, very cheap, cost-effective things one can do. So I'd like to leave you with a quote from Martin Luther. Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree. Let us plant apple trees in the gardens of our children so that they may grow and flourish. Thank you very much.